Adele, Celine Dion love Las Vegas. Las Vegas, the city that never sleeps, where bright lights flash like stars on a dark canvas, and every corner promises a chance at fortune, fame, and heartache. The Strip is the beating heart of the city, a stretch of neon lights and grandiose hotels, where dreams are both made and shattered. For two of the world's most beloved voices, it was more than just a city. It was a stage, a home, and a crossroads of fate. Adele Lori Blue Atkins, Adele to the world, had arrived in Las Vegas like a queen returning to her kingdom. Her powerful voice had earned her accolades, a place in the hearts of millions, and a reputation for pouring her soul into every note. But as she sat backstage, peering out at the grand Vegas crowd, a sense of unease lingered. She was in the city for a residency, her first after years of careful consideration. Adele loved the idea of being able to spend extended time in one place, but Vegas was a world all its own, a world where the pressure to perform and maintain an image could be suffocating. She'd been through the whirlwind of fame for years, the accolades, the tours, the personal highs and lows. Now, in a city known for its transient nature, she was trying to find balance, a new sense of home. And then there was Celine Dion. Celine had been the queen of Las Vegas long before Adele had even dreamed of taking the stage here. She was a legend, revered not just for her vocal range, but for her extraordinary ability to transcend music. The city had been her second home, with her residency at Caesar's Palace turning into one of the most iconic performances of all time. But that was before. Now, Celine's career was at a crossroads, and her health was no longer the powerhouse it had once been. Celine had made the decision to step back from the stage, to focus on herself, her family, and to heal from the physical toll the years of singing had taken on her body. But the city of Las Vegas, the world that had both adored and exhausted her, kept calling her back. Celine had been watching Adele's rise with a mixture of admiration and trepidation. Adele had come into her own, and she knew the pressure that came with being the next big thing, especially in a city like Las Vegas. It was inevitable that their paths would cross. In the backstage halls of Caesar's Palace, with velvet ropes and the hum of excited energy in the air, the two women met for the first time. Adele had heard the whispers. "Celine's just here visiting," they said. "She's done with the stage." Adele had seen the images of Celine's health struggles, the way she'd stepped away from the spotlight. Adele admired Celine, who wouldn't? But she also couldn't help but wonder what it was like to be someone like Celine, someone who had done it all, achieved everything, and yet still found herself at the precipice of a new beginning. When they met, the conversation was casual, but laden with unspoken understanding. Both women had a shared love for music, a shared bond of resilience, and a curiosity about each other's journey. "I've heard so much about you," Adele said, her British accent thick with warmth. She smiled with a quiet respect, her eyes taking in the woman who had defined Las Vegas for decades. Celine, looking radiant despite her health battles, gave her a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I've heard a lot about you too. You're the one who has taken over Vegas, aren't you?" Adele chuckled nervously, then shook her head. "I don't know about taking over," she said. "But I'm trying to make it my own." And with that simple exchange, the world of music, the city of Las Vegas, and the pressure of two legendary women collided in a way neither of them expected. Celine knew her time in Las Vegas was winding down, but she didn't quite know what that meant for her. Could she ever truly leave the stage? Could she move forward into the next chapter of her life without feeling the pull of the spotlight, of the adoration she had received from millions? Could she step back and allow a new generation of performers, like Adele, to take the reins without feeling a pang of regret or jealousy? Adele, on the other hand, was just beginning her journey in Las Vegas. She was trying to find her own place in the world, but it wasn't as easy as she had imagined. Behind the stunning performances and the accolades, she was grappling with questions of identity, pressure, and the fear that she might never live up to the legacy that Celine and others had created. What if she couldn't make Vegas her home? What if she couldn't handle the constant scrutiny? Their meeting was the beginning of an unspoken rivalry, but also the start of an unlikely friendship. Both women had been forged in the fires of fame, and both were at a point in their lives where they needed something more than applause and cheers. They needed authenticity. They needed to find their truth, not just as artists, but as women navigating the complexities of fame, aging, and identity. The clash of their worlds would be inevitable. One woman on the verge of stepping away, the other still burning brightly. But the city of Las Vegas had a way of throwing challenges at its inhabitants, and the magic of this city would test both of them in ways they never could have predicted. The love for the city, their music, and the stage would bring them together, but it would also threaten to tear them apart. In a city known for its lights, its music, its extravagant shows, and its never-ending whirl of life, Adele and Celine would have to confront their own hearts, their fears, and their futures. Las Vegas had always been a city of reinvention. Now, it would test two of the world's greatest voices in ways neither of them could have imagined. Would they find peace in the neon glow of the Strip, or would the weight of their legacies and their internal struggles leave them lost in the desert? Only time would tell. Las Vegas, shimmering under the neon lights, humming with the energy of its constant reinvention. For Adele, the city was supposed to be a temporary home, a place to find stability and a sense of belonging. Her residency had just begun, and the excitement of the crowd was intoxicating, but behind the curtain, doubts gnawed at her. Despite the standing ovations, the full houses, and the glowing reviews, she felt the weight of expectations pressing on her shoulders. The glamorous world of Las Vegas was both a sanctuary and a pressure cooker. Each night, she performed in front of thousands of adoring fans, but when the lights dimmed and the applause faded, she found herself alone with the silent questions that plagued her. Could she live up to the legacy of her idols, like Celine? Could she truly make a lasting impact on the city, or was she just another fleeting moment in a place built on impermanence? Celine's absence from the stage was still a palpable presence in the city. Even though she had stepped back from her residency, her influence hung in the air, a constant reminder of the impossible standard Adele felt she had to meet. Celine had set the bar so high, and the idea of surpassing her was both thrilling and terrifying. But there was something else, something Adele wasn't yet ready to confront. In the quiet of her hotel suite, away from the stage, she felt an unspoken competition with Celine, one that had become more about validation than artistry. Celine, too, was grappling with her own internal battle. Her decision to step away from the stage had not been an easy one. The world of Las Vegas had consumed her for so long, and stepping back had meant not just leaving behind her residency, but also the very essence of who she was. The applause, the adoration, those things had become part of her identity. But after the health issues, after the toll the years of performing had taken on her body, she realized that something had to give. Despite her quiet retreat from the spotlight, Celine wasn't truly ready to leave the world of music behind. She knew the city still whispered her name, still remembered the years of unforgettable performances. But it wasn't just about the stage, it was about what came next. She had spent her life striving for perfection, but now, as she looked at the younger generation of artists, including Adele, she felt a pang of envy. Adele's rise had been meteoric, her voice unmatched, and the energy she brought to the stage reminded Celine of her younger self. Yet, as much as she admired Adele, there was a growing resentment. Celine had built the empire that Adele now stepped into, and now, watching Adele's success from the sidelines, Celine couldn't help but wonder if the younger singer even knew the true weight of what it meant to be a legend in a city like Las Vegas. What did it cost to sustain a career like that? To endure the pressures of constant reinvention? As the weeks passed, their interactions became more frequent. Adele, unsure of how to navigate her feelings toward Celine, found herself drawn to her in a way she hadn't anticipated. They would meet after performances, exchanging pleasantries and stories about their time in the city. But beneath the surface, something was shifting. The dynamic between them was no longer simply that of two artists. It had become something more complicated, an unspoken rivalry, masked as friendship, that neither woman fully understood. Celine, for her part, began to feel a sense of ownership over Adele's success, even though she tried to suppress it. The young British singer was now the face of the Vegas residency world, and Celine couldn't deny the feelings of resentment that bubbled to the surface. Adele's success was a reminder of the passage of time, a reminder that even the greatest could eventually be replaced. But it wasn't just the professional envy, it was the emotional toll that came with watching someone else take the spotlight, someone who seemed to do it so effortlessly. Celine's fears deepened as she saw Adele as the new face of Vegas, her voice echoing in the very spaces Celine had once dominated. The conflict between them deepened when a new twist emerged, one neither woman could have predicted. Adele's residency, which had begun with so much promise, was suddenly marred by unexpected complications. On a particularly hot August evening, as she was preparing for yet another sold-out show at the Coliseum, news broke that Celine had decided to return to the stage for a limited engagement, under the banner of a farewell tour that promised to be the final chapter in her Vegas reign. The announcement hit Adele like a ton of bricks. She had known that Celine's return was always a possibility, but the timing felt like an intentional challenge. It wasn't lost on her that Celine had chosen the exact moment when Adele was beginning to gain momentum, when the city had started to accept her as the new face of Las Vegas entertainment. What was Celine trying to prove? As news spread, the media began to speculate about the showdown that was brewing between the two singers. The pressure on Adele intensified. The city of Las Vegas had always thrived on competition, but this was different. This wasn't about two entertainers sharing the stage for the sake of performance. This was personal. Celine's reappearance on the Vegas stage made it clear that her legacy wasn't finished, not by a long shot. She was determined to show the world that her time in the city was far from over. She wasn't ready to fade into obscurity, and Adele, despite her own rising star, was now caught in the crossfire. Adele's confidence began to waver. Every performance became more difficult as she felt the shadow of Celine looming over her. In the days leading up to Celine's opening night, the media buzz reached a fever pitch. Headlines screamed about the battle for Vegas supremacy, and social media was flooded with comparisons between the two singers. The tension reached its peak on the night before Celine's first show. Adele was backstage, preparing for what was to be her most important performance yet. Her manager, a sharp-tongued, no-nonsense woman named Emily, paced anxiously in the dressing room, eyeing Adele with concern. "You're letting this get to you," Emily said, her voice firm but concerned. "Celine's return doesn't mean anything about you. You've earned your place here." Adele, her fingers trembling as she adjusted the microphone, sighed. "It doesn't feel that way, Em. It feels like she's coming back to remind me that I'm not enough, that I'll never be enough." Emily shook her head. "You can't think like that. Vegas is big enough for both of you. Besides, you've got something she doesn't. You've got heart." But as Adele walked onto the stage that night, the crowd's roar seemed to fade into the distance. The stage felt empty, the spotlight colder than it had ever been. Every note she sang felt like an echo of the larger-than-life voice of Celine Dion. The words of her songs felt hollow, as if they were being compared to something far grander. The turning point came after a week of brutal performances and growing media attention. It wasn't just the competition, it was the toll the rivalry was taking on her emotionally. She was exhausted, both physically and mentally, and it was starting to show in her performances. Fans began to notice, and the press, hungry for a story, seized upon any sign of weakness. Then, the revelation came, delivered in the form of a private letter, handwritten and sealed in an envelope. Adele had received many letters before, but this one was different. It was from Celine. Opening it, Adele read the words that would change everything. Asterisk, "I see the pressure weighing on you. I see the doubt creeping in. You are me in so many ways, and you will survive this. But you must know something. My return to Vegas was never meant to overshadow you. It's meant to remind us both that we don't have to be in competition. We are both worthy of this city. The real question is, can we both find peace here?" Asterisk Adele's hands shook as she finished reading. The message was cryptic, yet it felt like a lifeline thrown into the stormy sea of her emotions. Was this Celine's way of reaching out? Of offering a truce? Could they truly coexist in this city, or would the competition ultimately tear them apart? As the days passed, Adele realized that the true battle was not with Celine, but with herself. The city of Las Vegas, with its bright lights and endless spectacle, had become a mirror to her own fears, doubts, and insecurities. The real question wasn't about who would win the Vegas crown. It was about whether she could accept herself for who she was, not in comparison to others, but as her own person. But the tension between her and Celine had not yet reached its breaking point. There was still a city to conquer, a legacy to protect, and a future to fight for. And in Las Vegas, the stakes were always higher than anyone could have imagined. The air in Las Vegas had grown thick with anticipation. The rivalry between Adele and Celine had reached its boiling point, a palpable tension settling over the city like a heavy fog. Both singers had been playing their roles as icons, each trying to carve out a space in a world that seemed to only have room for one. Adele stood backstage before what was to be her final performance of the month. The night she had promised herself would be her triumphant return after weeks of battling with self-doubt. The media had been relentless, the comparisons to Celine impossible to escape. Every moment had been weighed, analyzed, and judged. The pressure had become suffocating, but tonight, she had decided she would silence the voices. Tonight, she would prove to herself that she wasn't just a fleeting moment in Vegas, that she had something permanent to offer the city. The lights were dimming, and she could hear the murmurs of the crowd, the rustle of excited fans awaiting her entrance. Her heart beat in her chest like a drum, heavy and erratic. The hum of adrenaline surged through her, a familiar feeling, but this time, it felt different. This wasn't just another show. This was a declaration. She could hear the footsteps of her manager, Emily, approaching, her voice cutting through the tension. "Are you ready for this?" Emily asked, her tone steady yet filled with an undercurrent of concern. "I know it's been rough, but you've got this. Just remember why you're here." Adele nodded, but her thoughts were elsewhere. In the back of her mind, she knew tonight wouldn't be just another performance. It was a showdown. A showdown with the city, with herself, and, most haunting of all, with Celine. Across town, Celine was also preparing. It wasn't just any other show for her either. After her return to the stage, she had been met with overwhelming support from her loyal fans, but she, too, felt the weight of the expectations. Her opening night had been magical, a testament to her enduring star power, but she knew Adele's recent performances had set the city alight. The young singer was a force to be reckoned with, and tonight, Celine couldn't shake the feeling that this was a moment of reckoning for both of them. As Celine stood before the mirror in her dressing room, she couldn't ignore the familiar knot in her stomach. Despite everything she had accomplished, despite all her years on the stage, she still found herself fighting for validation, fighting to prove that she belonged. The crowd outside her door was buzzing with excitement for her show, but in her heart, there was a storm. She had never felt so conflicted. Was she ready to share the stage with Adele in a way that wasn't rooted in competition? Was it possible to be both icons in the city, or would it tear them both apart? It was the moment of truth. Both singers had reached the precipice. The moment of collision, the curtain lifted, and the roar of the crowd thundered through Adele's veins. Her heart slammed against her chest as she stepped into the spotlight, her body silhouetted against the flashing lights of the stage. Her eyes scanned the crowd, but something felt off. There, just in the front row, was Celine. Adele froze for a split second, the sight of her idol, her competitor, sending a ripple of uncertainty through her. Celine's eyes were locked on her, unwavering, like two titans circling each other. The crowd was oblivious to the tension between the two women. To them, it was just another night of entertainment. But to Adele and Celine, this moment was anything but ordinary. It was a battle for the very heart of the city. Adele shook off the momentary paralysis and let the music flow through her. She sang with the intensity of someone who was fighting for more than just applause. She was fighting for her place in the world. She poured every ounce of her soul into each note, her voice soaring above the crowd, her emotions laid bare for the audience to see. But as she sang, a strange feeling lingered, like something was missing. The connection she normally felt with her fans, that unspoken bond that made each performance feel unique, seemed distant tonight. The weight of Celine's gaze, the knowledge that the Queen of Vegas was watching her every move, clouded her mind. She finished the song and quickly exited the stage, her heart still pounding. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. The battle between them was no longer a matter of vocal prowess or stage presence. It was about something deeper. It was about legacy. As Adele caught her breath backstage, Emily approached her, her face a mixture of concern and admiration. "You did great out there," Emily said softly, though her eyes betrayed her true feelings. "But something's different, isn't it? I can see it in your eyes." Adele nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. "It's not enough. Not anymore." Across town, Celine was facing her own storm. Her performance had been flawless, her voice unwavering, but as she looked out over the sea of fans, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. It wasn't just the standing ovations or the cheers. There was something more. The city that had once belonged to her was no longer just hers. She could feel the whispers of change in the air, a sense of inevitability that sent a chill down her spine. And then, in the final moments of her performance, she did something unexpected. As the song reached its climax, Celine paused, standing still under the spotlight as she scanned the crowd. The anticipation built in the room as the audience waited for her next move. And then, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, she whispered into the microphone. "I've been watching you, Adele," she said, her voice low but clear. "And I have to say, you've got something I haven't seen in a long time. Don't let anyone take that from you." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, the entire audience was silent. Was this an olive branch? A challenge? The words could mean anything, but for Adele, they felt like both a gift and a warning. As the days passed, the tension between Adele and Celine reached its apex. The media had a field day with Celine's words, dissecting every nuance of the statement. Was it an endorsement? A challenge? Whatever it was, the stakes had never been higher. For the first time in weeks, Adele allowed herself to take a breath. Celine's message, though cryptic, had struck a chord. She had been consumed with trying to outdo the woman who had come before her, but now, for the first time, she realized that the battle was not about besting Celine. It was about finding her own voice, her own path, in the city that had embraced her. In the weeks that followed, both women found themselves at a crossroads. Adele, fueled by Celine's unexpected words, began to step into her power. She found a new level of confidence, embracing the very thing that had once made her doubt herself, her authenticity. No longer trying to mimic Celine or anyone else, she poured herself into her music with an intensity that was undeniable. Celine, too, found herself reflecting on her own legacy. She had spent so many years trying to hold onto the title of the reigning queen of Las Vegas, but she had forgotten the most important thing: her love for music, her passion for performing. The city had become a battleground, but what if it didn't need to be? What if they could both coexist? Two powerful women, each with her own story, her own journey. The final confrontation, if you could even call it that, came in the form of a private meeting, arranged by neither of them but rather by mutual friends who believed that the two women needed to face each other and put an end to the rivalry once and for all. The room was quiet, the tension palpable, as Adele and Celine sat across from each other. No words were exchanged at first, only the heavy silence that hung between them. And then, Celine spoke, her voice softer than Adele had ever heard it. "I've been where you are," she said, her eyes searching Adele's. "The pressure, the expectations, the constant fight to prove that you belong. But there's something I never learned in all my years. Something I wish I had known earlier." Adele tilted her head, waiting for the words to sink in. "It's not about who's better," Celine continued, her gaze steady. "It's about who you are and whether you're willing to embrace that. Vegas has room for all of us. It always has." For the first time, Adele understood. The rivalry, the competition, It had all been a product of their own insecurities, their fear of being forgotten. But in that moment, the walls that had been built between them began to crumble. "I see that now," Adele said, her voice thick with emotion. "And I'm ready to be me, not a shadow of someone else." As the neon lights of the Las Vegas Strip flickered against the desert sky, the city that had once felt like a battleground for Adele and Celine now seemed like a place of endless possibilities. It was a place where dreams were born, where the impossible became possible, and where two legends could finally coexist, not as rivals, but as two powerful forces in the music world, each with her own legacy to shape and protect. The weeks following the breakthrough meeting between Adele and Celine were filled with change. It wasn't the kind of change that came overnight, nor the kind that the public would immediately see, but it was real and significant. The rivalry that had once threatened to consume both women had begun to fade, replaced by an unspoken understanding, a deep respect for each other's journey. Adele had always struggled with self-doubt. She had questioned her worth, her place in the industry, and whether she would ever live up to the expectations placed on her. But in the wake of her conversation with Celine, something shifted inside her. She no longer needed to prove herself to anyone, especially not to the city that had embraced her from the very beginning. With a newfound sense of clarity, Adele returned to the stage with a different energy, one that was rooted in authenticity rather than competition. She stopped trying to outdo Celine or anyone else, and instead focused solely on her music, her voice, and the connection she had with her audience. The crowds that flocked to see her were no longer just there for the spectacle of her performance. They were there for the raw emotion that poured out of her, the vulnerability that made her music so powerful. It was on one such night, as she stood at the center of the stage, the lights illuminating her face, that she realized how far she had come. The applause was deafening, the energy in the room undeniable, but what mattered most was how she felt in that moment. For the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. She had found her place in Las Vegas, not as a rival to anyone, but as an artist who belonged. Backstage, after the show, Adele was greeted by Emily, who had been with her through thick and thin, always there to support her. The look on Emily's face said it all. "You did it," Emily said, her voice filled with pride. Adele smiled, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "I think I'm finally figuring it out." But it wasn't just the music that had changed for Adele. She had also begun to take control of her personal life, finding balance between her career and her own happiness. She had started reconnecting with the people who mattered most, and she was learning to let go of the negative voices in her head. No longer haunted by the fear of failure, Adele was living for herself, and that was a victory far greater than any performance or award. For Celine, the shift was equally profound. She had spent much of her career at the top, constantly battling for relevance, fighting to hold onto her crown as the Queen of Las Vegas. But as time passed, and as the world around her evolved, she realized that perhaps the most important thing wasn't being number one. It was finding joy in the art itself. It was about remembering why she started singing in the first place, long before the glitz and glamour of Vegas had taken hold. Her shows in the city had continued to sell out, but now there was a calmness to her performances. She no longer needed to prove herself. The competition, the constant push to be better than the next big thing, had faded into the background. Celine was at a point in her life where she could savor the moments that mattered most, the quiet conversations with her bandmates, the joy of performing a song she loved, the connection she shared with her loyal fans. One evening, after a particularly moving show, Celine found herself sitting alone in her dressing room, the echoes of the crowd still ringing in her ears. For a moment, she allowed herself to reflect on everything that had led her here. She thought of the years spent in the spotlight, the struggles, the triumphs, and the people who had supported her along the way. And most of all, she thought of Adele, the younger singer who had once seemed like a threat, but who now felt more like a sister in the industry. It had been hard to let go of the idea of constant competition, but Celine had done it. She had finally realized that there was enough space for both of them in the world of music. Their paths didn't have to cross in a battle for supremacy. They could coexist, each woman contributing her own unique voice to the fabric of Las Vegas. And in doing so, they were elevating each other, lifting the city to new heights. One night, as she watched Adele perform from the audience, Celine felt a sense of pride welling up inside her. She wasn't just watching a rival anymore. She was watching a fellow artist, someone who had found her own voice and was using it to touch the hearts of millions. After the show, Celine approached Adele backstage, a smile on her face. There were no words of competition, no subtle jabs or insinuations. Just two women who had learned to respect each other's journey. "You were incredible tonight," Celine said, her voice warm with admiration. Adele looked up, her eyes shining. "Thank you. I couldn't have done it without you." As the weeks turned into months, the buzz surrounding Adele and Celine's newfound friendship began to spread throughout Las Vegas. Rumors swirled about a potential collaboration, a concert where both women would share the stage, but neither of them was in a rush to make it happen. They had both learned that sometimes the best things in life weren't forced. They came naturally, in their own time. Finally, the day arrived when both singers were scheduled to perform at the same venue, on the same night. It wasn't a joint performance, but it was a symbolic one. Their shows would overlap, and for the first time, they would both be part of the same night in Las Vegas, each holding their own spotlight. The night was electric. The venue was packed, and as the first notes of Adele's voice rang out through the speakers, the crowd erupted in cheers. Her performance was as powerful as ever, but there was something different in the air, a sense of unity, a shared understanding that they were all part of something greater than just a competition. As the night went on, Celine took the stage, her voice filling the space with its trademark elegance. The audience was mesmerized, drawn into the magic of her performance. But this time, there was no sense of rivalry between the two women. Instead, there was a quiet acknowledgement that they were both part of the same legacy, part of the same world that had embraced them both in different ways. By the end of the night, as the crowd stood and cheered for both performers, Adele and Celine shared a glance backstage. No words were needed. They had both found their place in Las Vegas, and they had done it on their own terms. As the months passed, the collaboration that everyone had speculated about finally came to life. It wasn't a grand concert, but a series of intimate shows where both Adele and Celine took the stage together, each singing their own hits while also sharing the spotlight in moments of harmony. The shows were a celebration of their individual talents and a testament to the power of mutual respect. In the end, Adele and Celine had found something far more meaningful than a rivalry. They had found friendship, understanding, and, perhaps most importantly, peace. Las Vegas, a city known for its larger-than-life performances and larger-than-life egos, had become a place where two women had learned that the greatest power didn't come from competition, it came from collaboration. And as they both stood on the stage, side by side, their voices blending together in perfect harmony, they knew that this was only the beginning. The city had room for both of them, and they had finally found their place.